Is there a way to explain eternal spiritual life? This video explains to you that eternal life is made up of 6 stages that keeps repeating in more and more perfected ways. It's kind of a new and mind-blowing way of looking at life, so stick around as we progress through the stages and you will see how they logically fit together and provides an explanation of where we are right now. We know that we have evolved from minerals to plants and animals, and most recently into human beings. This video takes a departure in things that we already know about evolution and expand it with the spiritual world. This video is based on the work of the Danish author Martinus. He explains the evolution continues beyond our current state as human beings. We will become more and more perfected as living beings, and at some point become real human beings and get into higher spiritual worlds. From these higher spiritual worlds, we will return to the evolution with minerals, plants, and animals in order to renew our consciousness. This makes up an eternal circle that is the foundation for our eternal life. I will explain how and why this happens based on the work of Martinus. So who is this Martinus? Martinus had some spiritual experiences that enabled him to see the big picture of the world. He has written about 10,000 pages, held many lectures, made symbols, and had argued this new way of looking at life. He calls it a spiritual science because it takes into account that there's a spiritual world, and it's a science because it's written in a way so we can follow his logic and check it against our own experiences and with our intelligence. He encourages us to check his work and not just believe what he's saying. It is also an eternal world picture he's describing because it's about eternal principles that has and always will be. I started reading this work when I was 17 years old, and I'm currently teaching it through lectures and courses, and of course making these videos. And speaking about videos, if you found all this intriguing, please subscribe to the channel. It keeps you updated on future videos and really helps the channel as well. And if you have any comments or questions, please leave them below. I'll be happy to answer. And let's get started with the main part of the video. We know about the physical evolution and how life on Earth has evolved. What is new is that Martinus explains that the development that we have seen in evolution will go on. We as human beings are undergoing extensive development at the moment, which we can find by examining all the advancement we find in knowledge, technology, society, and so forth. We find that we constantly develop. But where is this taking us, and what is the purpose of this development? Martinus explains that we are not what he terms real human beings yet, but we will be eventually. We are a mixture of animals and real human beings at the moment. Animals live on the notion of being closest to yourself and living on the behalf of other living beings. Martinus explains that we also have a real human side to us. This is the side where we live to serve and don't live on other living beings' behalf. We try to help out. We find this in hospitals and other humanitarian organizations where we try to help people without looking at who they are and what they can get in return. This is a side of a consciousness that consists of neighborly love. We don't see these abilities and phenomena among the animals. This is something that has come along as we have grown as living beings and become more and more human. Our intelligence and more sophisticated feelings are also a sign of us starting to become real human beings. The animal side of us is decreasing and the human side is evolving. Sometimes the animal side of us is the strongest, and other times the human side. Martinus states that at some point we will become complete as real human beings and mentally belong to the real human kingdom. The real human kingdom is the state in our eternal life after the animal state. In the real human state, we will have learned to live peacefully with each other, have a society that takes care of all citizens, has overcome sicknesses, and our world has in many ways have become kind of a paradise compared to what we experience right now. It requires that we get more human abilities so we can overcome our animal side. It will take experience and practice, but it's just a matter of time. Our development as living beings will continue even when we become real human beings. We'll eventually get into a higher spiritual world and leave our physical life behind. Martinus described 2 planes in the higher spiritual worlds. one primarily based on intelligence and another one on intuition. These worlds are hard for us to understand because they are so much above and different from the way we live right now. Martinus once said that explaining the higher spiritual worlds for us is like explaining our life to a stone. So he has not provided us with that many details, besides that it's based on neighborly love and a very, very pleasant existence. It is way beyond what we would consider a paradise. So what he has said about the high spiritual worlds is that it's where the big plans and ideas are made and where the entire ideas for the universe is coming from. It is where the world is steered in some ways. It is the primary part of the world. This is where we get to see the purpose of everything that happens in the world. We will see that everything is a blessing and good for living beings. The physical world where we live currently is primarily to develop us as living beings. Living in the physical world puts an additional layer on us as living beings and enable us to live at an even higher state in the higher spiritual worlds. So every time we go through the circle, we have put something on us, an additional layer, so we can live and experience in the higher spiritual world in an even more perfected way. So what is the logic to this? So the living beings gets to these higher spiritual worlds and lives in peace and bliss. However, there is a principle of hunger and saturation, of being full of things, being tired of things. It is like if we go and have our favorite food for a long time, we will start to long for something else. The same principle kicks in the high spiritual world, but at a much bigger scale. At some point, living in these higher spiritual worlds gets old, or the living beings get tired of it. There are no more new experiences that having been experienced all over again. Martinus uses words as it gets boring to live in the higher spiritual worlds. It might be very difficult to grasp that you would ever leave a state of bliss and a kind of a paradise. But we have to understand that it happens over a very long period of time. Every aspect of this paradise has been lived over and over again, and there's nothing new anymore. There are no new contrasts. It has been sunshine for forever, and the night of darkness starts to be interesting just to have some sort of kind of different experience. We start to eat from the forbidden tree, to use biblical terms. Anything outside of God's garden has become a blessing because it's something new. So two things happen when the living beings get tired or bored of these higher spiritual worlds. Firstly, the living being finds kind of a rest in its inner world, where it re-experiences its previous life in the circle. That is from where it was from mineral, plants and animals, real human beings, and so forth. Although it will re-experience it in a fully logical and blissful way. The living being lives in its own blissful world. Martinus called this the kingdom of bliss, and it's the last stage in the circle. The second thing that happens is a longing for this contrast I talked about. The living being has been living in higher spiritual worlds until tiredness, and the contrast is the physical world. This longing activates talents for living on the physical plane, and the living being starts to manifest again on the physical plane. We know this manifestation as minerals. We can see the beauty in the minerals and their logic, but we don't find consciousness on the physical plane in the minerals. That is why we can cut our nails and cut our hair without pain. There is no reaction from the minerals to this. But there is a living being behind it, because there is logic behind it. These living beings are the living beings living in their inner blissful world. And we only see the results that it can manifest on the physical plane. So what we see here is a consciousness that starts to redevelop into the physical plane, but still have the main consciousness on the spiritual plane. So what we also find is that the large stage in the circle is also a new beginning to a new circle. It's the same stage where you have this kingdom of bliss and the mineral kingdom. That's where you go from one iteration in the circle to the next one. But the living being develops further into the physical plane and starts to be aware of what is going on. It still has no clear images of what is going on, but a distinction between pleasant and unpleasant experiences starts to form in the living being's consciousness. We know these living beings as plants, and they are the first stage in a new circle. The development goes on, and the consciousness becomes more and more advanced again on the physical plane, and the living beings become fully consciousness on the physical plane. At the same time, there has been a shift in the consciousness from the high spiritual world, where the living being lived to serve and was all loving beings, to the animal stage where the living being lived for itself. This happens to provide the living being with the contrast it needs in the higher spiritual world. In the higher spiritual world, all living beings live to serve each other. In the animal kingdom, the living being can live to serve itself. Thereby it gains a new contrast that it can live by in the higher spiritual world. It has expanded its consciousness, and it has gotten its consciousness renewed. When the experience of the contrast is fully experienced, then the living being starts its journey back to the higher spiritual worlds. We as human beings on earth are in the middle of the process of experiencing this ultimate contrast to life of bliss. There are some real unpleasantness in our life with wars, divorces, poverty, and so forth. We are starting to move away from this unpleasantness. We are tired of war and all this unpleasantness. We want peace. But we haven't figured out how to not get ourselves into war. We do move towards a more peaceful and loving existence, and this has become our ideal. We just cannot practice it right now. But we have to learn and develop into this peaceful state, and that requires learning from both practice and teaching. The ultimate goal is to treat each other as you want to be treated yourself. We know this from the Bible as neighborly love. That's what it's all about. Recently we got the Spiritual Science by Martinus that has the same message as these religions, but the message is explained. So it's not just something we have to believe in, but something that we can study and understand with our intelligence and check it with our own experience. So what is the logic in this eternal circle? How does these 6 stages actually work together? Our eternal life goes in these 6 stages that makes up the circle. We add something to our experience of life in each of the iterations in the circle, and thereby our life becomes more and more perfected or perfect. The circle becomes more like a spiral because we add something after each iteration in the circle. We keep growing and expanding for eternity. Our eternal life is a continuous growth and expansion of what we understand, what we can express, and what we can create. The logic in the 6 stages is that we need to experience new contrast to expand and renew our life experience. We have to renew our consciousness to have an eternal life. We cannot just experience white or pleasantness forever. At some point, we need the contrast. If it was only white, we would only experience, or actually we wouldn't experience anything because it would only be that one color. We need the contrast. And at life's big canvas, we also need these contrast, and we need to keep expanding and getting new contrast in order to keep living. It might sound a bit horrible that we need to go through the unpleasantness, particularly the last part of the animal stages in which we live right now, but we have to remember that after a long period of time with a light and pleasant way of living in the high spiritual worlds, going back into the physical world becomes a blessing. It becomes a light for us to experience this contrast. And if we look at the animals, they are mostly in some kind of state of happiness, or at least almost never worried. We as human beings have an inner conflict between the animal and the human side of things, and that causes us a lot of trouble. We don't have a natural state right now because we have 2 different stages in us that keep conflicting. But that is what comes along with every birth of a new thing. There are some complications, there are a little bit of pain, And when that is over, everything is fine again. And that will happen with us as well. We'll get through and become real human beings eventually, where we are not torn anymore. We'll know what is right and wrong for us to do, and not as right now, where we are in conflict with each other. Even what we today consider unpleasant had looked pleasant to us at some point. We wanted to get into our current state when we were in the higher spiritual worlds. It is not something we experience as a punishment. It is something that we really want at some point. And we can also reach a point where we understand why we go through this unpleasantness and suffering. There's a meaning behind it. There's a purpose with it all. And that puts us into a much lighter perspective. So what is our purpose right now? The spirit circle also defines the purpose of our life. Eternal perspective, the eternal purpose of our life is to experience it. And the local purpose of our current life is to become real human beings, is to go further in the eternal spiral. We have to unlearn our animal talents and have the human talents to take over. Our human talents are still rather new, so there's a tendency to fall back on what we know best. And that is our animal talents, where we hurt each other. The human talents are intelligence and to have compassion for each other. The animal talents are to be angry, exploit each other, and generally not be nice. The animal talents are so rooted in us that they are automatically auto-activated. The human talents are still new and in many cases weaker than the animal ones, so they often lose out to the animal talents. But that will change. We will get our experiences from treating each other badly. Martinus talks about karma, and that we will get the learning back and we'll develop as human beings, the real human beings, and at some point these human talents will overtake the animal talents and we'll become real human beings and enter the real human kingdom. And Martinus also explains that in the real human kingdoms we will have what he calls a permanent intuition, and that's an ability to see the eternal principles in the world, see the purposes of what is going on, and resolve the mystery of life. So in this video we have seen 6 stages that makes up our eternal life. The principle of the 6 stages repeats over and over again with higher perfection and thereby makes up a spiral. So that is the logic to our eternal life as it is explained by Martinus. I hope this gave an idea about what kind of world picture Martinus has laid out for us. We are eternal living beings who constantly go towards a better life in this eternal spiral of life. It provides us with a life that also includes the spiritual side of things. We are not just a physical body, but have a spiritual or mental side to us. We found 6 stages in this eternal life that repeats itself at a higher level and thereby creates a spiral and not just a circle. If you found this video valuable or intriguing, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. That really helps the channel grow. And if you have a comment or question, please leave it below and I'll be happy to answer. And then all that is left to say is thank you for watching.